Hello, everyone, and welcome to Look Down There, the show where we talk about all the things we don't talk about. I'm your host, Michelle Lamore. Today, my guest is Las Vegas-based, Canadian-born writer, photographer, pinup model, and burlesque dancer. She was the first ever person to receive an American green card for her outstanding abilities in the art of striptease. Pretty amazing. She is the publisher of An Occasional Man and a collection of short erotic stories called Bohemian Pulp. Here she is in all her fabulous vintage glamour, Bettina May.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michelle. So good to see you.
Hi, Bettina. You're looking lovely as always. I expect nothing less from you, especially I love that you're so glammed up, like ready to get your vaccine today. It's pretty great.
I wish I was like Dolly, who had like the like little sleeve cut out. She's like,
yeah.
I have a hole in my shirt just for it, and it's glamorous.
That is awesome. Yeah, I was looking over your bio that you sent, and you said something like started in 2000, blah blah blah, and I was like, oh, 2000, that's pretty recent. And then I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, like that's 21 years. What? How did that happen?
It's so crazy doing the math, and I don't mind it. Like I've never felt weird about aging, but it is weird to think that it's been happening this long because, you started burlesque back in the early days a bit too. And I remember thinking, oh, maybe I'll do this for 5 years or like a couple of years, but like for sure, maybe I'll have to stop when I'm like 26.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. I absolutely felt the same way. My official striptease was in 2003. So before that, I choreographed a striptease for someone else in 2002. And yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, well, I'll see how it is when I'm 30, and here it is all this time later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 21 years ago, what brought you to burlesque and pinup in 2000?
God. Well, I was doing pinup in 2000 and then started burlesque in 2003.
And you were still in Canada at this point?
Yeah, I was in Victoria, BC. And I had always kind of been interested in vintage everything. Starting in high school, I would like buy vintage patterns in stores. And I, like most kids grew up watching like syndicated old TV shows like I Love Lucy and stuff like that. So I remember like my earliest memory was like 5 years old asking my mom, like her and my play school teacher were talking about the old days when they'd have to curl their hair. And I was sort of like tugging at her sleeve, like, Mom, when are the old days coming back? And she was like, the old days are over. And I was like, ah! I just started crying.
That's
Is it any wonder I turned out how I did?
right. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just always like interested in that stuff. And then I sort of found the rockabilly scene and sort of through the punk scene. And then through the rockabilly scene, I started seeing burlesque and I heard of Dita Von Teese and, all those sorts of people kind of like, and then, Betty Page. So all of that sort of early 90s or like mid to late 90s stuff that was kind of happening, like the movie Swingers, that every guy in college discovered 10 years later. You're like,
right. Like Cherry Poppin' Daddies, like that was a big scene then.
Totally. The like swing revival and stuff like that. So I kind of got caught up in all that stuff and loved it. And then I was like, oh my God, burlesque is amazing. It's like being in a 1940s musical, but in real life and someone pays you to do it. What?
And sometimes you have to change in a closet.
Yeah, most of the time. Sometimes in an outdoor alley. Sometimes in a kitchen.
Totally. It's so glamorous.
Glamorous. I'm always reminded of that scene in Singing in the Rain where Gene Kelly's being interviewed on the red carpet and they're like, how did you get here? And he was like, my motto was like, always, like, well, dignity, always, or something like that. And then it like cuts back to like his real life where he was like, like scrounging around in the vaudeville circuit. And I'm like, That is so what burlesque is. It's like smoke and mirrors, glamour.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking about a place I used to perform at in Malibu, and it was like a big deal place, like really hard to get into. And I was like, wow, it's really cool. I got to perform there. And then I started thinking, oh yeah, but then I had to change in basically a hallway with curtains. And I was in a pile. They had all their extra chairs in there and like extra TV equipment. And I had, maybe like, 2x3 space to change and get my suitcase in there. It's like, I don't really miss that. Do you miss that?
I didn't think I did until I had a meetup with a venue in town that wants to start bringing burlesque back now that the regulations here have changed to like 6 feet with masks on. And so I went to go meet them, and they're, really awesome. And they led me through to sort of show me, like, we went to go talk in the office. And I felt nostalgic walking through the kitchen to get to the office. And I was like, oh, this is where I'll get changed, right? She's like, yeah, just cover up the camera with a cloth so that you're not recorded while you're changing. And I was like, oh, this brings me back. And I was like, whoever knew I would feel nostalgic about like, don't run through the kitchen because the floor is covered in grease and you'll probably fall.
Oh yeah. Walk through many kitchens, tiptoeing, trying not to get my expensive
dress up or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
Saying hi to the dishwasher. You're like, what?
Right. Oh my gosh. They love it. They're like, this is the best job ever, because you have to go through the kitchen to get to the stage. And then you have to walk back through the kitchen.
And you're just like,
naked, yeah. And they're like, oh, okay, I can do this. This is all right. So tell me about the first time that did you model first, or did you do burlesque first, or was it kind of one and the same for you?
Yeah, I modeled first. I was doing, sort of DIY just for my own sake. I sort of, a friend and I were like, oh, for our boyfriends, like Valentine's presents, let's take pictures of each other on film, mind you, because we were too on a film, and we were like, we can't really afford to buy them something, so let's make them things. But we ended up spending like $200 on black and white film and developing. And I was like,
photography is expensive.
Yeah, thank God for digital. But that's when I realized, I'm like, this is more about me wanting this than really caring about getting him something. Because I wouldn't have spent any money on his present, but I was willing to do this for myself. And I was like, oh, I think I just like modeling. And it was really fun. And then I started doing Suicide Girls in like 2000. I guess that was 2000, and they came out in 2001, and I heard about them. And then 2002, I finally applied, and then my set went live in 2003. So,
wow. Yeah. So you were one of the original Suicide Girls, I guess, right? Because it kind of came out around that time.
Yeah, it was part of I was in the first 100 girls who were there. And so we were all friends. We all knew each other. And they were international. So it was just the coolest, like my first experience with networking before burlesque. It was with Suicide Girls, and it was so cool. And I would travel all over just based on like couch hopping through Suicide Girls. Like, oh, are there any girls in this town? I want to go like on a road trip. And they're like, oh yeah, I live here. You can stay with me. And it was just like immediate trust, because we're all, the vanguard of naked on the internet,
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're a pioneer, truly. Like, was that really the first social network maybe for this kind of?
Pretty much. Before that, okay, so I remember all of them. There was Makeout Club was first.
Makeout Club. Oh, I haven't.
Makeout Club was really cute. And it was like I had a boyfriend at the time, but both like, let's make Makeout Club profiles. And it was kind of like a emo punk rock, like social meetup group online, and you would put a picture, and so you had to have like a screen name. And so I chose, my first online screen name was Argenta, which was, I was in a bunch of like no budget horror movies, and that was my character name, was Argenta. So I was on that, and then it was Friendster, and then Suicide Suicide Girls advertised on Makeout Club. And that's how I saw them.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. They're headquartered in LA, right?
They were Portland at the time, and then they made the move to LA.
Yeah. Because when I used to live in LA, I used to drive by Suicide Girls all the time. And I know I never did it. I think I was kind of scared to do it, which is funny looking back.
Right? No, you're the most naked girl.
Like, oh, I have to be naked. I don't know. I don't think I can do that. Cut to Michelle Moore, the most naked woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Michelle Moore, put some clothes on. You're like, I won't.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's funny because in my everyday life, I think people expect me to be naked all the time, but I'm not. It's really just a reference to my stage presence. So that first time you did your pinup modeling for your boyfriend, but really for you, what sort of clicked in you? Like, were you always really confident in your body and your sexuality? Like, did that grow as you started modeling?
I was always a confident kid. I had, that sort of second wave feminist mom who was just like, you can do anything. And my mom wasn't confident. And so she really pushed me to be confident, which was great. But I wasn't like post puberty. I wasn't body confident because, I was growing up with like 90s Playboy and I was like, I don't look like that. And so it was when I first saw those nudes of Marilyn Monroe on the red satin, the ones that were released after her career took off. And I was sort of like, oh, like that is what a naked woman can also look like. She had like smaller breasts and they weren't, sitting up high and, she had some curves to her. She didn't have chiseled abs. And I was like, that's the sexiest woman in the world. I think everyone would agree that that's how she is considered the biggest sex symbol. And I was like, and she, we don't look the same, but I was like, that's closer to what my naked body looks like than, anything else I'd seen, which was more like fitness models with breast implants, which is also fine, but it was just not me and certainly not like, pubescent me. So it was really cool to see that and think like, oh, maybe I can have confidence in my body. And it sucks that has to come from an external source, but, that was the world I was growing up in as a woman then. And so that was cool. And so then to take photos of myself and, not have them be like awkward, like with my family pictures, and to have them be like, this looks like these vintage photos. Like that's, oh my God, wait, can I be sexy? That's so cool. And that was just I found it super empowering. And that's why I kind of like devoted my life at first to like pin up and helping women to like pose for those photos, because that made such an impact on my life to be like, oh wait, if I can do my hair and makeup in like a vintage way and then like learn how to hold my body like vintage pinup models did and then see myself, it just gave me so much confidence. And I just felt like, wow, like that felt like power to me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It's seeing yourself reflected is really important. And, I know you said it's a shame it had to come from external, but also your feelings of insecurity came from external sources as well. So, it's good that you were able to see something positive in an external source. And I think that's really important, and that you're embodying that and also bringing that to other women as well, and kind of holding up the mirror and being like, look, you are beautiful. Let me show you how beautiful you are.
Totally. Yeah. That has been so cool in my classes too. And like helping women find other things, like I don't look like every woman, but, being like, oh, well, that's why I love that there's all these new sites like Black Pinups and, Pinups of Color and all these different Instagrams that just share all these different versions of, this is glamour for every person and what they look like. I had a student one time who her self-confidence was so low and she just couldn't even bring herself to smile because she didn't think she deserved to smile, which that's like a whole other topic we could go on for hours. But, she was just like, I'm not beautiful and I don't look like anyone. I'm like, but do you look like the other women in your family? And like, you wouldn't exist if someone didn't find your mother attractive enough to make a family with her. And then your grandmother also, like, you come from a long line of women and men who look, like families who look like you, and they were beautiful. You think they're beautiful, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, so you are too. Like, that's all the math that adds up to you being beautiful. And she was like, she was just like, I never thought of it like that. And I was like, yeah, like, you wouldn't exist. This is just like, people find you beautiful. And I think people, just however you can find it, just finding what it is that makes you beautiful.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that gives us confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's different for everyone, right? There's like no one way to be beautiful, no one way to be glamorous. And one of my sayings is beauty is truth. And so I feel like as soon as you tap into whatever your truth is, you'll have no choice but to be beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Like, you tapped into your truth and resonance with vintage era glamour and fashion, and like that brought out your true and authentic self.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's just like whatever it takes, right? But I think that everyone has it in them. And you're right. Beauty really, it sounds cliche, but it comes from within, and if I didn't believe that, I was worth looking at, then no one would want to look at me. And that's kind of how, you are what you exude. It's like all about that confidence and just owning yourself and your sexuality. So,
yeah. So when did you get behind the camera? Like, I kind of feel like you're a modern day Bunny Yeager. Like, I always think about Bunny Yeager when I think of Bettina May. So when did you get behind the camera?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because that first day that I did pinup photos with my friend, I shot her and she shot me. So both things happened on the same day. But I also always grew up with cameras. I was, my mom and my dad were both sort of like amateur shutterbugs, and my dad ran the school. He was worked at a junior high, and he ran the AV club, so we could go in and like develop film on weekends and stuff like that. And so I always was taking pictures and comfortable behind a camera. And there's even like, I would pose for like, I get my sister to like take pinup pictures of me, like with my like little like 7-year-old mullet, like in a bikini in the backyard.
Oh, that mullet.
Good one.
we all have those photos. My dad just sent me a photo of it was him with me and my brother and sister. And I was like, why do I have the same haircut as my dad? What is that about? It was like parted in the middle, kind of feathered out, like not in a cute Farrah Fawcett way. No.
Like in a David Cassidy sort of way.
Yeah. Maybe worse. Yeah. You're young. You don't have a choice in the matter usually. Oh, yeah. Right?
No, I at one point had a full on, like, I was super into WWF and wrestling, so I had a rat tail that I like braid. Oof.
That's great. That's amazing. Okay. So you went from Canada to New York and New York to Vegas. So tell me about all of those decisions.
Oh boy. Well, I always knew that I wanted to live here. And, one of my first sort of childhood goals is like, I want to live in New York. And I was just kind of obsessed with getting down here. And then, all of the burlesque work was down here too. The way Canada is, it's a really big country with not a lot of people. So touring is so cost prohibitive and time prohibitive. It's like 14 hours between major cities if you're driving, and it's like $1,000 to fly from one city to another. It's just, but you come down here and it's like, drive 3 hours, new city, drive 3 hours, like drive 1 hour, you're in another city that's small, so it's just, touring was much easier down here. So, after a lot of trial and error and, one day of getting banned from the States, I finally figured out how to get a work visa, and an American friend and I formed a company to sponsor my first visa so I could come down. We formed a show. And so I toured around in a traveling show for like a year and a half down here. And that was like 2009 starting. And then that sort of lost its allure, and we had creative differences. And I left the show, and she canceled my work visa. And then I sort of was scrambling to figure out how to stay down here. So that was like a very tense year of finding myself a new lawyer. And I left the show when I was on the West Coast, and I was kind of like, which city should I, where is a good city to base yourself in to do burlesque if you're not touring? And I was like, I'm in Portland. I'm not sure if Portland, there is a burlesque scene there, but I wasn't sure if I could be full-time. And I was like, I know I could be full-time in New York. And I think I only have one chance to try, because I had some money saved up. And I was like, let's just try. I can always move back to the West Coast if I need to. So I gave it a go. It was like a really hard first year, because it was more expensive than I can ever imagine just to live there.
Yeah.
And then getting a green card, it was a mistake getting a New York lawyer. Woo! Eye-opening. My advice to anyone wanting to do this: find the cheapest lawyer imaginable, because you're going to be doing the lion's share of the work anyways. It's such a new field and they don't really get it. So I worked my ass off to get that green card, but I did it, but even getting the work visas meant we had to set legal precedents for burlesque, because they just didn't have it on their books. So we had to prove that it was an art form. And, so at least, anyone coming in now, all that work has been done. And when I got my green card, it set such a big legal precedent that it went out in trade papers kind of internationally.
Wow. Bettina May paving the way. There she goes.
So yeah, that was huge getting that, because it just took a big weight off of my chest. Because if they said no, I would have had basically 2 weeks to depart the country and never come back.
Oh my God. Yeah, that border crossing can be very stressful between Canada and here. It's every time I would just break out into a sweat, because we're not supposed to be doing it. So yeah, it's really scary, and I'm glad you're here legally now and in Vegas, and hopefully once everything is clear, I'd love to hang out with you.
I know. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's happening soon. Yeah.
So I want to talk about 2 other of your projects. I want to talk about An Occasional Man, which I love. And I always want to say occasional male. I don't know why, but yeah, Occasional Man is freaking great. I mean, basically a male classy pinup magazine, which just does not exist. So tell me about that inception and what your goals are with that, or your mission.
Cool. Yeah. So I first started it actually way back in 2008, while I was still living in Canada. Sort of happened when I was on tour in Hawaii, and the girl who I was touring with over there, she's Hawaiian, and so I was living in Victoria, and we're both Pacific Islands. So we were like, oh, what if we make a little cute zine about cool island boys that we like, and then also feature rad female artists that are doing awesome stuff. So basically Tiger Beat for grownups, and with a little bit of old school sassy magazine thrown in. So that was kind of the idea of it. And so, and then eventually we lost the sort of island themed. We're that doesn't matter. No one cares. and just started finding cute boys to take pictures of, which was surprisingly difficult back then. There was a lot more homophobia, and guys were really resistant to it. And I found that super frustrating and off-putting. I was like, first of all, I'm a woman, a straight woman photographing men. So why are you thinking that? And also, who gives a shit if guys look at this and find you attractive? You should be so lucky. Right. And so that was, so I did it for a year and a half. But during that time, I ended up getting my first work visa and coming down here. And I managed to keep it going for a bit when I was on the road, but not having any permanent home address just made the logistics of getting the copies shipped to me and sent out. I'd get it shipped to the next venue, but if I'd miss it, then I'd miss the shipment. It was such a nightmare. And it just got harder to, guys are just being so weird and wishy-washy about wanting to model too, which was very interesting to see how it's the same guys who would love female pinups and would, buy that, but put them in front of the camera and put them as the object. And suddenly they're like, oh, well, people are going to think this about me and that about me. I'm like, what you're saying is that's what you think about women when you consume images of them. That's what I'm hearing. And I was like, interesting.
So interesting. I did not think about that aspect at all. That is really interesting.
It was super interesting. So I was like, you know what? I'm just juggling too many projects. Let me put that one aside. And then I picked it up again in 2019 because I was feeling more stable. I had moved to Las Vegas by that point, and I wasn't so consumed with touring and performing as much anymore. And I was like, I'm doing more photography. I'm sitting on all these amazing photos that I've done with friends, sexy performer guys who are much more comfortable being photographed and being looked at and being sexy in front of a camera. So let's, bring that back. And so it's been a really fun project. And I have to say, I was so grateful for it, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Just having something with a schedule that I could still do during this was really, really good to have, something to focus on and be excited about. So, and I was also very glad I was like, maybe I'll do it monthly. And I was like, no, I'll just stick to quarterly, which is the original schedule. And thank goodness for that, because it's definitely been hard for a number of reasons to get models right now. First of all, just like being in the same proximity as people was hard. So and then trying to get people to like send self-portraits. Oh my goodness, it was a nightmare. But I've managed to get it together, and now everyone's being a bit sensitive about their extra COVID-19 that they put on. and so that's interesting too. Like, I'm really learning a lot about men's body insecurity, which is interesting.
Yeah,
it's different than women's body insecurity, but it's still there. And in some ways, men aren't as homophobic anymore, but they are much more insecure about their bodies than they were 10 years ago when I first started this. And that's a shame. And I don't like that they've sort of picked that up from, I guess, like women's modeling culture. And they're all, concerned about not looking shredded, or, they either think they're too skinny or they're not skinny enough. And it's like, it's all the same things. And it's so sad. But
yeah, that is a really surprising thing. And I remember the first time that I came across that, and it wasn't anything that I had thought of before, because, you only hear about women's insecurities and women's body issues, and men aren't really given a space or a platform to really talk about that, right? Because if they talk about that, then they're seen as weak. And so that's the last thing they want to talk about, right? So I remember, a few years into my burlesque career and teaching, that I was teaching a burlesque class. I was teaching it with Hot Toddy, and we were kind of tag teaming this class together. And I had a room full of men, and we did a little move where we brought a shirt up so you could see a little bit of stomach. And they were shaken, like, to the core. It's like they couldn't. It was like suddenly they had to deal with all of these issues that they never had to deal with, because they're just not sexualized in the same way that we are. So we have to grapple with this all the time on a daily basis, maybe hourly, whatever, like with social media constantly putting it in our face. It's like we're always confronting this and doing the work around this issue. And that was really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's something that I want to try and sort of address with the magazine. It reminds me of when, I was doing Suicide Girls, and then Suicide Girls got super popular, and there was a lot of criticism about lack of diversity in like body size and color. And I'm good friends with the owners, and we were talking about it, and it was really this sort of chicken egg scenario where they're like, well, these are the girls who feel comfortable applying. So these are the pictures we have. And then this is what people think we want. And what we want is diversity, but those people don't feel confident applying because they're not seeing it, because we're not getting those. But it's like this circle. And I feel like the same way with the magazine. I would love to feature more diverse bodies. But when I reach out to those guys, they're like, oh, well, I don't have the body for that. And I'm like, what I'm saying is you do, and I want it in the magazine. Would you be brave enough to be in it? And that is the challenging spot I'm in right now. But, and I am sort of trying to like I don't want to like force someone to be in it, but I'm sort of working on a few people like, I would love for you to be in it if you would feel comfortable. And the cool thing that I'm loving about the title, An Occasional Man, in this sort of redo of the magazine is that I can incorporate so much more diversity as far as gender and sexual identity, because the play on a man occasionally a man, so I had my first trans cover model in the last issue, and I've also had drag kings. I had Wayne Newton, who I love, and got to get Murray Hill in there. Murray,
I know. I'm waiting for Murray. Murray.
Need to do a centerfold with Murray. So I love that, and even there's just so much room to play with that, which I love, and just incorporating so much more interesting things, because they're sexuality and sensuality is unlimited, and I think we've been sort of limited by labels, and I sort of love that these younger generations are kind of pushing aside and being like, we don't need those labels, don't apply. And I feel like we've sort of been going through some growing pains with labels in the past few years, but I think we'll get to a point where they're just irrelevant, because it doesn't matter, because we can just be who we want to be. And that's kind of the future I'm like excited for.
Yeah, right. But we just have to get through the muck to get to the other side.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about you is how boy crazy you are. I freaking love it. And it's inspiring. I just think it's like my favorite thing about you. So I want to talk about your erotica for a minute. Is this all autobiographical, or what's the deal? Is this a tell-all Bettina May situation?
A lady doesn't tell in person, she just tells in her volumes.
Volumes. There's volumes, people.
This is I know it's a picture of me on the cover. So it's hard to be like, it's not me, but yes, there's me. But we'll just say I've had a very interesting and full life, and there's lots of embellishments. But as I say in the front, I'm like, it's not about you, fella. So quit thinking that it's all about that time we were in that place.
I love it. Again, it's just like another form of empowerment and expression and confidence. And I love that. Like, I love your confidence, and I'm going to call it pussy confidence. Bettina May, you are pussy confident.
Thank you. I remember taking, I think it might've been one of your first pussy confidence classes in New York through this New York School of Burlesque, and God, I loved it. And that's when I was like, Michelle's amazing. It was such a great class.
So much. Yeah. Wow. I remember that. It was one of the first times I had taught it, and it's grown so much since then. And so have I, and so have you. And that's the whole point, right?
But yeah, people need pussy confidence. Actually, the thing about that I love about the books is, like, if I come home from like a disappointing date, I love that I can just write how I wanted the date to go in my novels. I'm just like, but he should have said this, and he should have touched me here, and then it should have done like this, and then he should have left right away.
Yeah, and then sometimes that fantasy is just so much better than the reality.
Totally. But I also like writing about like things that go wrong, like the funny things you're thinking, because sex is actually funny. It's really funny. And, there's so many funny things that you can be thinking in your head while you're doing it. You're just like, oh, did you hear that sound? Was that sound supposed to happen? Was that me? Was that him? And, just all those funny, and then, or if it's like boring, you're just like, how do I wrap this up? Let's do this. Okay. All those things are funny. And, and I've just had some like funny conversations, and, everything about sex, I think is fun and funny. And even just like courtship is fun and interesting. And, that's kind of been the funny thing about this quarantine, is it sort of brought back the Victorian courtship period. I remember like early in the pandemic, there was someone that I wanted to meet up with, and we were just so like, how does it work? So we would like sit out on his front lawn, like far away, wearing masks. And I was like, there is nothing more Victorian than sitting on the front porch for the whole neighborhood to like chaperone us and then make sure we're not touching, and like It was actually highly erotic. It was great to just be on display like that.
Yeah, and I can imagine that there's an eventual moment, like if those meetings go well, where the big reveal of the bottom of your face can be really intense. Yeah.
I kind of love it. And I think there's been some fun stuff. Like I mean, I remember going hiking with a friend sort of like at early summer when we were just sort of like, okay, like let's go outside again. And, people on the trails are all wearing masks. And then suddenly like everyone looks attractive if they're like if you haven't seen people in a long time and all you see is their eyes. And I was like, I mean, this is that whole appeal of, when we were, kids, like I Dream of Jeannie and stuff like that. That's sort of like very cultural appropriation of, wearing veils and stuff like that. But I'm like, oh, I get it. Because, when you just see the eyes, you're like, what's down here? What's going on here? And then I'm like, it's the guy who's fit. Or it's like, that guy's wearing a mask. How nice of him. Oh my God. I want to take him home immediately. You're like, it's so weird how you're like the things you're attractive to are so fluid and how they can change based on what's happening in society and what you're going through,
Yeah.
Suddenly Tinder profiles were all like pictures of guys at political rallies or like, and wearing a mask. And you're like, oh, I see what you're going for here. Like, okay, like what do those signs say in the background? Okay, this is what you're saying. I see. Like those like little clues we take to try and like attract a mate and how that works is really fascinating.
Yeah. All of our new social cues and learning how to interact with each other again.
Totally.
Yeah. I sometimes think like, do I know how to talk to people? Do I remember?
Oh, yeah. I've started doing photo shoots again with people, and I'm like, I don't remember any nouns or verbs to describe body parts. I'm like, move that, this part of you. I don't know. And it's, especially because now with photography, I'm not doing physical adjustments on people, and that can be, and so often when people aren't experienced models, they require a physical adjustment when you're trying to explain, like, I need you to move your foot like a quarter inch. And they're like, which foot? Back. And, you're mirrored to them and they're like, it, how it goes. So to not be able to do a physical adjustment requires so much more explanation. And then you're like, I'm like double masked and I'm like trying to be careful. Oh my goodness. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort. And, the importance of communication really goes up, and even expression, what are your eyes saying? Because you can't use the rest of your face. So you have to be really intentional with your eyes. And that can be really exhausting in social situations. So curious how my stamina is going to be after this. Because I went to Costco last week and I needed a nap when I got home. I was like, oh man, it's a lot of energy here. Whoa, not used to this.
It is a lot. Yeah. It's like doing a show. It's like performing, to go out. You're like performing safety all the time. So.
Okay. So this is crazy. We are in Vegas and it's hailing right now. Can you hear it? It is literally bouncing off my window right now.
That's amazing. I'm going to check and see, is that happening here?
Ridiculous.
It's not happening here, but I can see the clouds. Actually, yesterday I went up to Red Rocks and it snowed.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So, all right, we've devolved into talking about the weather, but let's bring it back. I got distracted. Like when weather happens here in Vegas, I'm like, what? Like I can't focus on anything else. Like the one day
because when
I was on the phone with my friend and I was like, I couldn't talk about anything else except the snow. So anyway,
speaking of balls of ice.
Yeah, right. Balls of ice are sexy. Look at that. Everything's a turn on now. So where can people find you and keep up with you and like get Occasional Man, all that good stuff? Tell me all the Bettina May things.
Well, if people want to go super old school and look at a URL, they can go to bettina.ca, because I still keep that Canadian website, or occasionalman.com. I'm on the Instagrams, at Bettina_May, and, Occasional Man is on there too. My photography is Bettina May Studios on Instagram. So it's all over the place. And you'll know you found the wrong one because there's this lady she's on Instagram who's Bettina May as well. And I love her for this. It says, not the famous burlesque performer.
Oh, that's cute.
So I was like, I've made it.
That's so cute.
Just tired of being tagged in pictures of sexy ladies all the time. She's like, this bitch. But yeah, I'm all over the websites and internets, and people can find my stuff there.
That's great.
They're all linked. Yeah, trying to keep up with the kids.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's becoming increasingly harder these days. I just saw a commercial for the Grammys, and I was like, I know 2 of these artists. I don't know what's going on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have a hit record in 1960. I don't know them.
Oh my gosh. It's happening, Bettina. It's happening. Anyway, it was so great to see you. And thank you so much for doing the show. Always a pleasure, my dear. And I can't wait to have a cocktail with you in real life.
It's going to happen. I feel like this is our year, which is what we said last year.
Right.
This year. This year.
Yes.
Probably, definitely, maybe.
Well, thank you, Bettina, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Michelle Lamore, and you can follow me at Michelle Lamore on Instagram, and you can also follow Look Down There at I Look Down There on Instagram as well. And a friendly reminder, of course, is to grab a mirror and look down there.